Today we're looking at women's role during the American Revolution. Hello, welcome to the Daily Bellringer. Please don't forget to subscribe and take a look at the questions down in the description. During the American Revolution, much of what historians focus on are the actions of men. Major decisions of the Continental Congress and military actions were all dominated by men, and so much of the focus of historic study is on men. However, it's very clear that the Americans would not have been victorious if not for the contributions and actions of women. If we go back even before the first shots were fired in the American Revolution, women were at the forefront of protest against British regulations and taxes. Going back to the Stamp Act passed in 1765, the Sons of Liberty was established to organize protest against the act, but simultaneously, the Daughters of Liberty was established as well. Since many women were in charge of households and the primary person in charge of what goods were being purchased for their homes, women really led the charge in boycotting British goods. Interestingly, one of the forms of protest women took part in was spinning cloth. Since Britain was the primary supplier of textiles or cloth to the colonies, the act of making your own cloth was a way of protesting British rule. Once fighting began, women again played an important role in supporting the armies. Women were not allowed to serve in the military, but the armies fighting in the war could not have functioned if not for their efforts. Since the Continental Congress did not have the authority to tax, they had a difficult time in trying to support the war. So women took it upon themselves to provide what they could to the armies by making bullets, sewing blankets and uniforms for the armies. They also organized fundraising campaigns to provide money to feed and clothe troops. Women traveled with the armies as they marched and provided important labor needed to keep the army functioning, such as making sure troops were fed and caring for the sick and wounded troops. Providing intel to the Continental Army by spying on the British was another way women supported the American cause. Since British troops were several times quartered or staying in homes of towns that they occupied, women would overhear their discussions and then pass the information on to the Americans. There's several fascinating stories of how women secretly passed information, but one unique system of getting messages out was developed by Anna Smith Strong, who lived in New York. She developed what became known as the Clothesline Code. Strong would hang a petticoat or an underskirt on her clothesline, and that was the signal that she had information to pass along to the American Army. And then she would also hang handkerchiefs on the line. And she lived along the shore of Long Island, so each handkerchief indicated a cove along the shore, and so the petticoat with two handkerchiefs meant there was information hidden in the second cove from her home. The British never caught on to this, and actually the information she gathered was passed on directly to George Washington and was instrumental in helping him continue the war. On the home front, women picked up the void left by men going off to fight in the war. In a society where most people were still farming or involved in agriculture, women took over farms and planting and harvesting of crops. In addition to being responsible for taking care of homes, they were also taking over businesses. And beyond simply supporting the fight, there were some women who physically joined the fight. There were some women that disguised themselves as men in order to enlist and fight in the army. Probably one of the most famous instances of a woman being involved in battle occurred at the Battle of Monmouth Courthouse in New Jersey on June 28, 1778, with the actions of Molly Pitcher. Now, many historians believe her real name was Molly Hayes, and she was the wife of William Hayes, who was an artilleryman in the Continental Army. She got the nickname Molly Pitcher because at the Battle of Monmouth Courthouse, it was an extremely hot day, and she aided in the battle by bringing buckets of water to the front to pour over the cannons to keep them cool, but then also to keep the men cool as well. It's said that when her husband collapsed because of the heat, she took up her husband's position next to the cannon and continued loading and firing it throughout the battle, even having a British cannonball or shell rip through her skirt she was wearing, but she was unhurt. The ideas promoted through the revolution of freedom and liberty caused many women to begin to question their position in society, where again they were not treated equally. Some, such as Judith Sargent Murray from Massachusetts, argued that the revolution had demonstrated that women were just as smart as men and therefore should receive the same education and be offered the same opportunities as men. Abigail Adams, the wife of John Adams, but also his closest advisor and arguably equally responsible for many of his ideas on liberty that he advocated, she put pushed for more rights for women when she advised him while he was serving in the Continental Congress. She wrote to him and said, "I desire you would remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors." I hope you can see that women played an extremely important role in the American Revolution. Although maybe not always given the credit they are due, if not for the efforts of women, the revolution would have had a very different outcome. So with that, hopefully you learned something, and thanks for watching.